one of the biggest things that gets underestimated is how nutrition can play with your ability to like modulate your emotions in high stress environments. If you're going into a game or a second half underfed, that's really going to be a detriment to your ability to control your emotions or your decision making.
Step into the Pressure Lab, brought to you by Head First, the Philadelphia Union Foundation's mental health initiative. Here, we believe mental fitness is as important as physical fitness. You train your body every day. This is where you train your mind. The pressure, the doubt, the setbacks, they're all part of the game. But what you do with it, that's the skill.
Welcome back to the Pressure Lab. When we think about mental fitness, we usually think about feeding our brains, but what about feeding our bodies? Today's guest is not our typical athlete. She's someone who helps athletes perform at their best behind the scenes. Today, I'm sitting down with Marissa Gaab, the head of nutrition for the Philadelphia Union. Together, we will explore the connection between nutrition and mental performance and how our diets improve our mood, focus, confidence, and ability to perform under the pressure. So I'm so happy to have Marissa join this podcast.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So before every podcast, we always sort of tag in with this idea of sort of where we are and where we want to go with the conversation. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we know each other from our work together between the school and the academy. So I'm just sort of thankful to be sort of in this space for the little bit of time that we have, and so thankful to hear your opinions and your thoughts.
Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. So as I tag in, I give you permission to do the same.
Yeah, no, definitely grateful for the opportunity to kind of speak with someone about things that I'm very passionate about. Definitely work in more of like an isolated space. So I'm always grateful for our time together, and I'm sure this will be just another one of those.
So I guess like first, let's just jump into it. I think people are always curious about what goes on behind the scenes. We see the product on the field, but obviously there's so much work that goes into that. Just curious about your day-to-day.
Yes, day-to-day is really all over the place depending on what day of the week it is, how close we are to a game, what the recovery status of the team looks like. So there's things that happen every single day. We always have, a fueling station, offerings like that, but there's a lot of interactions that happen behind the scenes. Everything we do is very informal, I would say. So like we don't have a lot of one-on-one sit down with players, but if somebody's doing rehab on the floor, I might be sitting down there next to them, kind of going over maybe like a cramping episode they had in the game or just low energy, low mood. So there's a lot of that goes on throughout the day. I come up with a schedule and a plan for myself and the people that work with me. And then it usually goes out the window because something kind of arises. But that makes the job really enjoyable. It's definitely a relationship first type of job. If I don't have the rapport with the guys, I'm not going to know what's going on with them. And so that's been really rewarding to kind of watch that develop pretty naturally over the last few years. And I would say as far as compliance and buy-in, it's the best it's ever been this year. So that's been really, really special to see.
Obviously, everybody shows up a little bit differently. I mean, when you're, these athletes are coming from all over, so they all have different relationships with nutrition and their understanding. How do you create sort of an individualistic approach for every single athlete if they need it?
Yeah, definitely. I like to start with a pretty basic questionnaire right out the get-go at the beginning of the year, just to kind of get a feel for more what guys like. Yeah. I think just talking about food versus getting more into the education side is the best way to learn about them, and you can kind of get insight from that. And then you can really redirect and have very personalized approaches based off of that. So for example, if we've got a guy who has more of like a long-term injury, so we're dealing with a lot of things. Not only are we focusing on whatever the protocol is for healing, but we're also dealing with more of the mindset side of things. Like their body is going to change a little bit. There's a lot of attachment that comes with that, especially in male athletes. I think soccer, it's very prevalent. So trying to kind of keep those two things moving forward, you really have to have a lot of small touches throughout a week. And then, we do a lot of nerdy fun stuff too. We do hydration testing every week. We do body composition testing, labs, sweat testing, and all of these things I think are kind of fun for the guys, not labs. That's like a very dramatic day. You would think I'm asking them to like, give a liver or something, but they have a lot of interest in more of like the sports science side of nutrition of what we're able to do. And those kind of like sleek things, I think also give more buy-in. So it's been kind of cool to get more of like the holistic side of things and then bring the sports science side and try to have them converge. We've had more success with like more individual approaches over the last like 2 years. It's been more feasible. More guys are interested in it.
And do you find that there's a direct connection to what they're eating and as it correlates to sort of their mood and how their mood and performance and all the other things that we expect them to be on that day?
Definitely. Yeah. If you think about how we all kind of approach nutrition, whether it's conscious or subconscious, there's always some sort of like underlying emotion, whether it's enjoyment from what you're eating, whether it's you're eating something in response to how you're feeling or a feeling you're trying to avoid, or if like your response to stress is not eating. All of these things are, still applied to these athletes. And now you're trying to navigate more of like the psychological side of nutrition while also trying to promote more of like a performance based. That's, what everybody's looking for is like their performance. We need them on the field. We talk about this a lot. But it's very evident to me when someone is struggling, and I can tell pretty quickly based off of their energy and just how they're approaching meals.
I'm curious what friction you have run into when an athlete just feels like what they've done in the past works.
Yeah. Yes. Definitely a lot of fixed mindsets for sure. In some of those cases, I'm not going to name names, but we've had over the years kind of chipping away at some of those things, whether it's just the inevitability of getting older and your body changing and you can't do the same things you've always done and have the same response. You have to be more attuned with your body for recovery as you get older, or, injuries are an awful thing to experience, but sometimes you see the biggest turnarounds when somebody has nothing to focus on except their recovery, and then they start to see the positive impact it can make. But we do have a lot of bias that comes in. A lot of there's a ton of belief in doing something the exact same way for years. I think soccer is very much like any other sport with that. Yeah. So it's it happens for sure. Yeah.
I mean, when you work with these athletes, is there a story or a situation where you have seen someone really evolve with their fitness journey as it affects their performance, sort of mental well-being and all the things that are sort of feeding into the whole person?
Yeah. I can think of like a few players who maybe they become complacent with where they are and they think like this is the level that I'm going to be at. Either it's the team, whether it's knowing they're going to be more of like on the bench as a substitute, and then they have an opportunity to step up and they start to notice, the small things that they can do to make that frequency reach, or maybe they've been called up to the national team and they get to see what it's like with all these other players from all over the world, the best in the nation, what their habits are like. And then they start to develop an interest. We've had a couple guys, I would say, who have gone to quite a few national camps and come back a complete 180. Yeah. And, whether they want to admit it or not, they've definitely made some changes. I can think of a few, like just in the last few years, who've really made a lot of progress, and their maturity has improved a lot too. I think that's a big one. It's like once you get over the, 21 to 22 hurdle, suddenly you start to pay attention to this, and you're not going to Wawa quite as much as you were before for, quesadillas or nonsense like that.
It's interesting you say that, like, from age to age. If there's anything that someone can take away from this conversation, what are the sort of transitional nutritional building blocks that, from the 14-year-old all the way to the 22, 23-year-old pro pathway, or sort of that elite athlete, some of the things that they should be thinking about as they enter an academy world, or even just this idea of wanting to be a more elite athlete, like some of the things that they should be thinking about along the way?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're definitely working on that more at the academy. like establishing almost like a curriculum with them, but not like in a super dry way, like kind of more hands-on where they have to make their own type of snack. You've been there for the smoothie competitions. So, we did an education with like the U14s last year, and I was shocked with they were so impressive with their knowledge. And I definitely think probably their parents have more to do with that than anything else, but the conversations are happening at that age.
Yeah.
I think they start really excited about it. They hit like that 16 age and they're like a little too cool for some of this stuff. But we've had like a really good, I would say, baseline understanding of like carbohydrates. Let's just start there. Like if we can get anything out of this conversation with those guys, it's the importance of fueling yourselves like periodically throughout the day. So we start there. Then with the second team, we start to add in more of like the sports specific type stuff. We talk more supplements, gets a little more personalized. We do hydration testing at that age. And then once you get to the first team level, you almost have to like start back over again. So there's a lot of basic understanding, or there's understanding. I think protein, like everybody's got that down. We don't need to talk about protein anymore. We need to talk about carbs. We need to talk about fiber. Those two, I think, are just continue to be overlooked. And so we kind of like started to layer it from that early age and build. But it's hands-on, having them experience something I found to be like the most like beneficial way for one lesson, one sentence to stick in their minds, and then to see that like play out over time.
I know that you didn't really talk about it too much, but from our work together over this past year, I would not be lifting it up if I didn't throw a shout out for like I think even just their overall mood and seeing what they could make. And yes, it was through competition. But I think there's something about being connected and seeing what you were making and how it actually has an effect on your overall well-being. So much of, even when I was playing, I think I just ate food solely for fuel, as opposed to really enjoying the preparation part of it and being connected to what it is I was making. Can you, and it could just be your own perspective from your own experience or things that you've seen, make the connection between food, nutrition, and mental health?
Yeah, that's a big one. Wow. So to kind of like give you just like a little personal anecdote as far as like kind of how I got into this in general was when I was 23, my brother, who was older than me, passed away. And at the time I was an Olympic weightlifter. I was training for the national, international levels. Had like big dreams of making, trying to be in the Olympic rotation. That didn't happen, but the dream was there. And this all happened at the same time. And it really just kind of derailed everything. Mentally, for years. It takes a really long time to kind of get back on your feet from that. And I would, you just don't take care of yourself in the same ways when you're going through like those stages of grief. So I really had to kind of relearn how to take care of myself and fuel myself. One, as an athlete, still having goals and trying to continue with, whether it be a distraction or something that brought me joy at a time that was really painful. And then that slowly became, I'm now in a weight class sport. So how am I balancing managing grief, trying to compete, maintaining a weight class? So I had a lot of really bad recommendations from people. I'm sure you can imagine. I know anybody that's done wrestling or any weight class sports has probably done something not recommended and dangerous. And so I really had to self-educate because I was finding there weren't a lot of resources. And that kind of led down this path of, going to school for nutrition and then eventually kind of ending up here. And, some of those things happen amongst, we've had, some really tough challenges for a lot of our athletes at all levels, both academy up through the first team. And it's kind of like, I don't want to baby them or coddle them, but I do think that like paying attention to their mental well-being and always have some sort of offering or kind of a conversation, making sure they are taking care of themselves, especially, we've had a challenging start to this first season, right? So How are different guys handling that, processing that, and in what ways are they managing their stress?
Yeah.
There are always going to be some who, aren't really eating, aren't really sleeping. Yes, it's soccer, but it means it's their world right now, right? Maybe they're away from their families. So the nutrition side from like the psychosocial is so important. So like, are they going out to eat with their teammates or with friends that they've made? Are they eating in the actual dining facility and taking part in those team meals? And then you get down to like the actual nutrition science side of things. If you're not eating, that's going to directly impact your entire stress system as well. So it's like this, circulatory system that continues. So somebody needs to be there to kind of interject and be like, are you okay?
Yeah.
Are you taking care of yourself today? So it's, I think, a conversation that not everybody wants to have all the time either. So I have to, kind of assess the mental state of somebody. But that has been really, for me, like personally, very rewarding to be able to be that person for them, or at least to try to be. And then, I can have all the science and, biochemistry understanding in my brain, but like if I can't relate to an athlete, all that information goes to waste.
This podcast is powered by Head First, a program of the Philadelphia Union Foundation, has built a free toolkit at myheadfirst.org with worksheets, guides, videos, and resources designed for athletes, parents, and coaches navigating the mental side of the sport. And if you want something tangible, something your athlete can carry with them to every practice and every game, request a Head First bag tag. It's a free luggage-style tag that attaches to any soccer bag and links directly to myheadfirst.org through a QR code. It's a symbol, a reminder, and a connector, all in one. Request yours at myheadfirst.org. Coaches and clubs, reach out to us directly, and we'll send a full package for your entire team.
I appreciate the story that you shared and sort of your own experience. I don't think it's ever easy to talk about, but I think it's what's allowed you to show up as who you are today. And I think that's where a lot of your strength and your power come from, independent of being able to, squat clean and do all of these Olympic movements. Mm-hmm. So much of athletics is this person is responsible for this role. So you are the head of nutrition, and somebody's a head of performance, and I wonder from a coaching perspective, a parent perspective, a teammate perspective, what are some of the things that these individuals can do to support the work that you're doing? Because it's one thing to be the person that's in it. Mm-hmm. So when the gummy bears aren't there, they're going to say, okay, well, Marissa, where are the gummy bears? But how can others support your work? Like, how can people sit there and say, as a parent, like, what shouldn't they be doing? Mm-hmm. As a coach, what shouldn't they be saying? How can we model it? Like, all those things. Yeah,
that's a great question. You really can kind of get a good idea based off of the body language, especially when they're younger. I think, the athletes can be really hard on themselves when they have a bad day, bad game, bad training session, and really internalize that. And that's where I don't want to be preachy. I don't want to be like, you didn't do this at training today. Maybe that comes when we start to notice a little bit of a pattern. Yeah. So I think, being open and asking kind of questions, even if like they're at the young age where they really don't want to be asked questions. Yeah. Eventually the right person will ask and they will be willing to open up about some things. Same things with with our older guys. Some of them are fortunate to have great partners who, support them at home or helping prep like the best food. So having a relationship with them, me being able to communicate that stuff. We had athletes in the past who were trying to make some nutrition related goals. And, if I didn't have a good relationship with their wives, then that would be a lot harder to accomplish. So it's understanding maybe not necessarily projecting what you think the athlete needs and kind of asking and seeing what they think they need and kind of leading from there.
Yeah.
Because most of the times they're being demanded of something, be it performance, be it working through pain or discomfort. And it's nice to not be pushy in that way. I think like one of the best things I was told from our sports scientist that used to be here a few years ago, Walter, was, we're always asking the players for something. And like, when is the time where maybe we're giving them something?
Yeah.
And that is always like a grounding statement to kind of come back to when you feel like you're just, just grinding day after day with those types of situations.
Yeah. I mean, I have noticed that when like maybe an athlete is injured or maybe they're not getting rostered, or maybe it's just not working out, that it seems like you do a really good job at allowing nutrition to be something that they could be really good at, that they could try, that they could get a better understanding. I mean, people have different passions and different interests, and I'm curious, what is an easy thing for any athlete to do to just get started? We talk a lot on this podcast about pressure and dealing with that and doubt and confidence. Like, what's one thing from a nutrition standpoint that athlete can just start to do on their own?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing is like asking questions, honestly. That's, I think the guys who maybe have had struggles or had reoccurring issues, like whether it's of their own volition or a parent or somebody kind of pushes them towards me, eventually they ask for help. And that's the biggest thing. Like, that's what we're here for. I also don't want to be kind of interjecting all the time if it's not wanted or warranted. But self-awareness, I think, is the biggest thing. Any age, we need it more with the first team guys. The academy guys are starting to develop it a little bit more. They may have self-awareness in a performance way, but maybe they're not tuned in with like what it feels like to have low energy in a high humidity environment. Like, there's things that can be done to make it more comfortable, to make you feel more successful. I think one of the biggest things that gets underestimated is how nutrition can play with your ability to like modulate your emotions in high stress environments. If you're going into a game or a second half underfed, that's really going to be a detriment to your ability to control your emotions or your decision making. And my biggest challenge, I would say, over the last couple of years is when we have a struggle-filled first half. What are we doing at halftime? Did Kobe Bryant, I don't want to like try to bring in, one of the GOATs of all time, but like, you think of like all these amazing athletes who, yes, have, talent, but also have worked incredibly hard to be where they are. Do they change their habits, their behaviors when things are not going well? That is when you really need to be on top of things. Not when things are going perfectly. You're like, are motivated by the success.
No doubt.
You have to be motivated also by your own struggles. And I think that is something that self-awareness brings attuned to. And the younger age groups are definitely getting better at it. But we definitely need to keep pushing that along a little bit.
Yeah. I think earlier in our conversation, you had talked about the sort of body imaging that gets connected to nutrition. I mean, I have seen athletes really benefit from feeding their body, but some of the things I always say is, well, Keith, I don't want to get too big, or I like looking the way that I look. And as these young people are growing and into who they're going to be, what is your best advice or guidance in sort of managing sort of body image as young athletes are growing and as athletes who are even older trying to understand how to see themselves?
It's really challenging. And I think one of the biggest things you can kind of take away is that your body, just like anything else in life in general, is not going to isolate itself to one time period and be that way forever. It's going to undulate. It's going to change. How you look and feel when you're 16 versus 25 versus 45, there's always going to be a moment where you have to come to terms with your body, but also kind of taking pride in it. And I think that approach is a little bit healthier for some of these guys. We're not in an aesthetic sport, but soccer is, there's lots of bias as far as like what a soccer body looks like. You know, the amount of conversations and data I have with other dietitians all over the world as far as body comp testing, what we do with that information, who gets to see that information. And it happens at young ages too. Yeah. So we don't do body composition testing on our academy guys solely for the purpose of like, they're growing and developing. Yeah. Like there should be no opinion about what their body looks. If they're not performing well, if they look like maybe, or not look, if they're performing as if they're not fit, then that's something that can be addressed with a fitness coach. But I'm not coming in trying to manage the body fat percent of a 17-year-old. Yeah. I think they need to really kind of embrace where they're at and the work that they're putting in. And maybe there's behaviors that can help them a little bit to feel better, to move better, but none of it's coming from a looks standpoint on my end. That doesn't mean it's not something that maybe they're internalizing a little bit or comparing. But that's just a conversation that has to be continued for the duration of their careers and past it, I think.
And how do we shape that message with those that are also in their lives? So parents, coaches.
Yes.
All the people that have influence.
Yes. Oh, man. A statement I can say I've said multiple times to different staff members over the years, not just here, but elsewhere, is that like your ideas and conceptions and of a soccer player, of an athlete, of what you used to be like, that's the biggest thing, is when you have a lot of vets that are in the building, should never be projected on the athlete in front of you. It's a completely different person, completely different scenario, a different time. Everything is different. So that usually, one, offends some people, but then also kind of, I hope, forces them to kind of look at the conversations they're having. Parents too. Like I think one of the most reoccurring things that I'll see is like parents that are really obsessed with clean eating in their own lives and then pass that down to their child. Yeah. Which obviously we want all the kids to eat a whole food diet and all of that, but they're also children. Yep. And they're also training for, 2 to 3 hours a day in top of school. So I say it a little kinder to the parents, but it's the same thing. It's like, I'm happy to talk to you and whatever you're navigating as well. But what we're doing with the child needs to be specifically for their needs. Yeah. And I think when it comes back to that, usually things get back on track. But it's an ever-going conversation for sure with, all levels of staff, all levels of parents and guardians. And it gets spicy sometimes. Yeah.
I can imagine. I mean, being the parent, I definitely have caught myself at times, in that same messaging. Yep. And I don't think and even for anybody that's listening, I think it's not with not good intentions. Sure. I think that, but sometimes we don't always remember that the things that we say really do matter to these young people. And obviously when we're leading them, they take everything that we say, sometimes literally, but also it can affect them in a pretty big way. So complete pivot. Mm-hmm. I don't think you started in soccer. You were in football too, right?
I did, yes. One of my, I worked with the LA Chargers when I was a dietetic intern. So I was there for kind of like their preseason camp going into the beginning of their season. Very different world. Yeah. Yeah. Very high energy, intense, a lot of positivity. Very different though. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
As I sort of close this conversation, I am curious if there's one takeaway or something that you want this listener to be able to walk away with, whether or not it's just your own perspective, doing this work and lifting your work up, what's one thing that you would want that person to take away?
I guess the first, I'm going to do like a 2-pointer if I can. The first point is that the kind of information overload of our modern age, there's always something that's being elevated as like the most important thing to focus on. Like we joked about, protein's kind of it. You can find it in literally everything right now, like injected into sweet potatoes. Who knows? Like it's everywhere. But this, like anything, it's like the core things remain the core things. Yeah. The research hasn't changed on most of those things. It's the most consistent research. I think a lot of times people are focusing on the wrong things with the little impact versus what can make the biggest impact is more like long-term adjustments. It doesn't happen overnight. These athletes that made 180s in their diets, that took, a year and a half for that to happen. But it also requires a lot of self-awareness. Yeah. We make nutrition choices consciously and subconsciously. In my work with the team, in my work in private practice, it's always a conversation around what you're thinking and feeling. And that is always going to relate to what your nutrition choices are. So if you don't have that self-awareness, it's something that, we can develop, something that can change over time, but it does take a long time to happen. But it's going to give you the biggest push forward versus if you just go into something with trying to have like a death grip on discipline. Yeah. And then when that falls short, changing what you're doing. So self-awareness has kind of been like the biggest overlying theme that I would say I've seen across all populations, athletes, Gen Pop, anything. Yeah.
Well, at the end of every conversation, there's just a close. And so I think as I tag out from this conversation, obviously we've worked together, Marissa. I think I have so much admiration and respect for the work that you do, but probably almost like the silent impact that you have as well. I think anybody listening, whether or not they're in the academy, I think it's important for them to understand that they're not alone in sort of this journey and then this process of just adding more things to your toolkit. Mm-hmm. So we do a lot of things surrounding mental health and pressure. Yep. But I think the other part is this is a nice little twist to something we probably have not talked about. Mm-hmm. Is just the connection between mental fitness, mental performance, all the things, and connecting it to nutrition and how that's a part of it as well. So I'm so thankful for the time.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's nice to have an opportunity to talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I appreciate you.
Thank you, too.
Everything we talked about today is educational, not professional mental health advice. If you or someone you know needs real support right now, call or text 988. That's the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, free and available 24/7.